I think the biggest hurdle in front of solo agers is where am I going to live as I get older? There's a huge push for making things right for people to age in place. Communities are getting involved. I'm happy to see that because a lot of people will be aging in place. But honestly, I think it is a pretty crummy solution for solo agers. A lot of people see that as a kind of a polar decision. Do I age in place or do I move into some kind of senior living environment? Which is a good solution for many people. I know hundreds, thousands of people are very happy in senior living communities. So it's a great option for solo agers who can't afford it, for one thing. And honestly, there are other solutions. You might age in place with someone that you're close to, someone that you like. There's more home sharing going on now than ever before. And there are organizations, some local, some national, that help match people to live together. The reality is that there are a lot of things that can happen to you that would make you less able to continue living alone. So that's what I encourage people to think about alternatives to living alone.
Welcome back to the Real Retirement Show. My name is Yasmin, here with my co-host Kathleen. Whether you're retired or thinking about retirement, we delve into the multifaceted world of retirement beyond the finances. This isn't your typical retirement discussion. It's a vibrant journey into what retirement truly means in today's world. We bring you real stories from real retirees and experts discussing real challenges, surprises, joys, heartaches, and the myriad of emotions that come with retirement. From addressing family dynamics to mental and physical health to finding purpose, we tackle the issues that truly matter to retirees and those thinking about retirement. Our special guest today is Sara Zeff Geber. Sara is the nation's foremost expert on solo aging. She's an author, professional speaker, and certified retirement coach. In 2018, Sara was named an influencer in aging by PBS's Next Avenue and is a regular contributor to Forbes.com in the areas of aging and retirement. Sara's been featured and quoted in the Journal of Active Aging, Certified Senior Advisor Journal, Next Avenue, Senior Living Foresight, McKnight's Living, Senior Housing Business, and many others. Sara's book, The Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Agers, a Retirement and Aging Roadmap for Single and Child-Free Adults, was published in 2018 and was selected that year as a best book in aging well by the Wall Street Journal. We are so honored and delighted to have you on our show, Sara. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Yasmin.
Sara, for those of us who have not gotten a chance to get to know you or follow your work, would you share a little bit about your personal story and what inspired you to focus specifically on the solo aging journey?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. I was doing some retirement coaching back in 2015, 2016, and noticed about that time that a lot of my coaching clients, as well as my friends and colleagues who were all of my contemporaries, started spending a tremendous amount of time with their aging parents and ended up canceling dinner engagements and whatnot. And I was having a glass of wine with a friend of mine sometime in that period, and I hadn't seen her in the last month. And I said, Sandy, I haven't seen you much in this last month. We usually get together pretty frequently. And she said, I've been spending most of my life on an airplane, flying back and forth to the East Coast. We both live in California. And I have needed to do that because my mom isn't doing well. And my brother and I needed to find a better solution to how she was going to live because she wasn't thriving in the house that she'd been in for the last 40 years. So we ended up getting her to agree to move into a senior living community. We found one that she really loved, and we got her moved in. But that wasn't the end of it. Then we had to sell off the furniture that she couldn't bring with her, and we had to do tremendous amount of financial jockeying for her. And then eventually we had to sell the house, and it's really still not over. And it's been going on for over a year. And I listened to her talk, and I looked at her at one point and I said, Sandy, you and I don't have children. Who's going to do that for us? And that really became the question, who's going to do that for us? That started me on my trajectory of thinking about, researching, talking about, and ultimately writing about solo aging.
Mm. Sarah, now when we talk about solo aging, can you help define what solo aging means? Because I think there may be some different interpretations out there.
Yes, there are many different interpretations out there. And just hearing the word, a lot of people assume that I mean single people, people who never married, people who have lost a spouse, people who are divorced. And that is not exactly what I mean. I now define a solo ager as someone who is aging without the support of family. That may include people who have kids, if those kids live very far away, or if they're estranged. I have a neighbor, for instance, who's become a good friend, and she and her husband have one child, a son. And when he was about 30, he had the nerve to fall in love with a Danish woman. Well, where do you think they're living and raising their kids? So, is he going to be able to support them as they get older and need some help? I don't think so. He now has 3 kids. They don't have any plans to move out of Copenhagen. So that's just one example of just millions of people who have experienced something I've started calling the family diaspora. I have another neighbor who every Sunday at 5 o'clock, they have a Zoom meeting with their 2 adult children who live very far away elsewhere in the country. So it's a sort of a fluid definition, and people need to self identify more than anything else. There are sad cases where families have become truly estranged, and those people are certainly solo agers too. So, but my original category, and the one I still believe holds the most credence for being solo agers, are people that don't have children. Because after all, when you look around at society and who is caring for the oldest in our communities, it's primarily their adult children. And sometimes that kind of caregiving becomes their job for several years.
I have to say, Sarah, I can identify with your ethos of what you're doing and the comments you just made because I remember one of the first gatherings that Yasmin and I had where we were doing some research on the topic of aging and retirement. We had a group of people, and one of which was a solo. And when I hear of solo aging, I remember her. And she was a little resentful of what was happening and the information that was made available to her. But I really I haven't thought about your concept in those terms until you just explained it. I'm so glad you did because it does make a difference if you don't have children. If you have children that live miles or countries away, you're still faced with the situation of who's going to take care of all those needs and make those decisions. And I've gone through helping an aging parent relocate, and it is no small feat.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate, and I know that our listeners are really going to appreciate what we have to offer in today's podcast.
Sarah, what have you noticed are some unique challenges that solo agers faced that's different from those that may have family or other types of support?
Sure. I think the biggest hurdle in front of solo agers is, where am I going to live as I get older? There's a huge push for making things right for people to age in place. Communities are getting involved. I'm happy to see that because a lot of people will be aging in place no matter what I say or do, solo agers among them. But honestly, I think it is a pretty crummy solution for solo agers. A lot of people see that as a kind of a polar decision. Do I age in place or do I move into some kind of senior living environment? Which is a good solution for many people. I know hundreds, thousands of people are very happy in senior living communities. So it's a great option for solo agers who can't afford it, for one thing. And honestly, there are other solutions. You might age in place with someone that you're close to, someone that you like. There's more home sharing going on now than ever before. And there are organizations, some local, some national, that help match people to live together. I love the Golden Girls. I think that's probably the best example of home sharing that's out there. And everybody's seen at least one episode of the Golden Girls. They lived together. There were actually two generations living there in that house at one point because the B. Arthur character had a mother, Estelle Getty, that was living with them. And then there were two other women who were all more or less in their 60s and 70s, I would guess, except for Estelle, who was clearly in her mid to late 80s. They didn't like each other all of the time, but ultimately they did truly love and care for one another. And the idea of having somebody at home that cares for you, that says, "How was your day?" That says, "You look a little concerned about something." All of those everyday transactional sort of discussions that we have and relationship based discussions that we have can't take place if you're all by yourself. And many solo agers who do live alone um, proclaim that they love living alone, they're independent, and they're always going to be independent. But it's hard to take your 70-year-old self and put it in what may be your 95-year-old body and understand what you'll need at that point. Because it's a very different picture. People, no matter what you like to think, people do become more frail. They become less mobile. They become less able to do some of the things that they've been doing all their lives. And it may be due to a declining mental condition that will befall probably a quarter to a third of us. And it may be to a declining physical condition. But regardless of what you hope will happen to you as you get older, the reality is that there are a lot of things that can happen to you that would make you less able to continue living alone. So that's what I encourage people to think about, alternatives to living alone.
Sarah, you mentioned something about the community, whether it be a small community with the Golden Girls or whether it's a larger retirement community. I want you to explain what, in your mind, the misconceptions might be about solo aging.
When you say misconceptions about solo aging,
Talked a little bit about some of the challenges that they might have, but I'm wondering, you said there's the reality and then there's the ideology. So, what do you think the difference of those two parameters might be?
put in those terms, I think people, again, have a really hard time imagining what they will be like in 20 years. If you're sitting there listening to this and you're 65 or 70 or maybe 75, and you think, "Well, I'm doing great. My doctor gives me a clean bill of health, and I have a cranky hip that acts up once in a while, or gosh, I have some dental issues I have to take care of." Those all seem like t- tremendously surmountable problems. And yes, we probably all know that one 96-year-old who's doing great and still driving and still getting around and has a clear mind and is still problem solving, that's the extreme exception. And it's getting people to understand that they probably won't quite be the person they are today when they're 95 that's the challenge. That's really the challenge because people don't seem to be able to project like that.
Very true.
Sarah, you focused on the living situation, which is a huge area to plan for and to address. I'm curious, what are some of the other areas specifically that are relevant to solo agers, like Perhaps you hinted at social aspects, but what else do solo agers and their support need to consider for preparing for this journey?
Well, there's, of course, the financial aspect and there's the legal aspect. And so much of what I say really pertains to anyone, not just solo agers. But for solo agers, the way I like to think of it is for solo agers, there's no safety net. I have a good friend who actually is the father of a contemporary of mine who lived to be 99. And in the last 5 years of his life, he ended up feeling like he needed to turn over a lot of his financial stuff, his bill pay, his discussions with his financial planner, those kind of things. Ended up saying, I'm going to turn this over to my son and bring him up to speed on what the situation is. And he ended up bringing in someone to cook for him and to clean. Those were things that at 96 ish, he just finally said enough. He was a strong, independent guy. He had lost his wife 10 years before, and he drove up until the time that he was in his at least early 90s, and then was again persuaded by his children to ultimately give up the keys. We just don't have children that are gonna come in and pick up the slack like that. So, do we just wait and see? Just wait and see what happens. Not so safe for solo agers. Planning ahead of time with someone, a younger person that can step in and take over those functions is really important for solo agers.
I think to your point, though, I remember hearing you speak about the stool, the legal, the financial, and the social. Really, I was interested to understand how important the social aspect of aging was from your point of view.
Yeah, the social aspect is all tied up in where you're going to live. It is almost completely dependent on that because you may be very well able to go out and meet friends for lunch and participate in your book club and even go to the gym. At this point in your life, you just can't count on being able to do that 10, 15, 20 years from now. You just can't. You may not be able to drive anymore. I'm 75. I have a number of contemporaries who've already stopped driving at night and a couple who've stopped driving altogether. Now, yes, we are fortunate in this day and age to have Uber and Lyft and some alternatives to, especially those of us who live in areas without any public transportation. So those are helpful, but having a backup plan is really important. So that's the social. The financial and the legal, actually, need to be assigned to someone you trust to pick up the slack if and when you need that. Now, who knows? You may end your time on Earth. You may be on the other side of the ground before you ever need any of this. Fine. But that, in my mind, that doesn't mean you shouldn't plan for it because we'd all like to live as long as possible, especially if we're going to be healthy enough to enjoy it. So, here in California, we have something called a professional fiduciary. And that's someone that literally can come in and be the son or daughter that you don't have. They can take over that function. Of course, it costs some money. There are patient advocates, there are professional guardians. Most elder law attorneys, and they call themselves estate attorneys or elder law attorneys, they usually know of people that can do that because they've worked with people in the past and will be working with many more in the future and solo aging becomes much more prevalent. They have resources. So that's the first place to go. If you have an attorney that you're working with, he or she is a good place to go for that resource. Also, your county agency on aging, your council on aging, your senior center, they may know of people. Because this is a countrywide audience listening to this potentially. I don't know what resources you have in your state. I think the first line of defense on this are often trusted nieces, nephews, younger cousins. I have a younger cousin that's about 14 years younger than I am, and she is one of the people that is named on my advance directive for healthcare and on my power of attorney for finances. Another person that I have named is the son of a very good friend of mine. I've known her mother, I've known since we were 5 years old. I've known her son since he was born, and I know his values. I know that he's someone I can trust. So these are people. Now, I am married. So my husband, of course, is my first line of defense as I am his. But we don't know who's going to go first. We have no idea. So we're both planning as though we might be solo agers, true solo agers. We are solo agers by my definition, but we are both planning as though we might be the one standing alone.
Sarah, you had talked about these fiduciaries and also professionals that are working with people. And I'm curious, as a, let's say, professional financial advisor or maybe legal professional who may be working with a solo ager, what are some important questions, things that they need to be aware of that's unique to a client that is on the solo aging journey?
There are a number of things that both financial professionals and legal professionals can do to assist their clients. And as you're probably seeing, Yasmin, and I know the financial advisors that I know, and I know a number of them in this area, are seeing are opportunities to help people fill in the gaps. Anytime you want to say, let's get your family involved, then you can't do that with a solo ager. You need to find some other resources. So I encourage the professionals that I know, both in legal and in finance, to start collecting, start your Rolodex. That's a term that dates me. Start putting your Rolodex together of resources for your clients. The financial advisors that I know here are already putting together workshops. I do local workshops for solo agers, and they're starting to put their people into my workshops and starting to come up with, they're actually filling the workshops. That's one resource that you can do, that you can create. There are a number of, villages and senior centers around the country that are starting solo ager support groups. I'm certainly a big fan of that. I'm applauding every time I see one of those pop up on my Google alerts, because I have a Google alert on anything solo agers. I'm so pleased to see that. And so I encourage professionals to do that.
Yeah. Well, whenever I have my alerts, mostly you show up because you're in the epicenter of a lot of the soul aging conversation, Sarah.
Not everything anymore.
I always try and relate to our guests, and I have to say that I have done so with you because my children, I have 4 children, but none of them are close. And we've thought, do we age in place? And I know that you believe aging in place is only good if there's some community around you. I don't want to be lonely. And sometimes aging in place provides that for people, whether they want it or not. Usually they wouldn't, but that is the case. And I'm just wondering, I've learned so much. What are some of the lessons that you've learned from personally dealing with this topic over the last, 20 years?
I have learned all of the different resistances people have to changing their lifestyle.
Isn't that interesting?
And it's, again, that the terms that I put it in today are people are fairly incapable of putting themselves into their 95-year-old bodies. Now, I would say, and I often ask this in the presentations that I make to anyone, I will ask the question, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you took care of your aging parents? And of course, almost half, at least half, the hands go up in almost every setting. Those are the people that get it. They get it, what's in store for them. That's why they're attending my presentation. In fact, usually 3/4 of the hands go up. I wouldn't be one of those people because I didn't take care of my aging parents. They both died when I was fairly young and they were fairly young, so I never had that experience. Same with my in-laws. So those that have had the experience and really seen what I call deep aging creates, the environment that creates and the challenges that creates, really get it that they need to do something to protect themselves.
That's insightful. And I think no one can predict, as you suggest, because health concerns can happen at any age.
Right.
I'm going to share this little story because I know that it's going to help you. A good friend of mine, her husband was early 70s. She's in her late 60s. He had a stroke and passed away. She had suffered from dementia for the last year. They were solo aging parents because her son was miles and miles away. And now it is a mess because they can't find their financials where it's in a place that was going to be accessible by anyone. They hadn't positioned themselves to have someone else step in with power of attorneys or any estate planning. And it has now become an extended family's problem. And even though, she has a child, doesn't necessarily mean, as you said, it could be estranged. And it's still, you have to depend on your own resources in planning. This happened recently to me that I was made aware of my friends. It's the change that we can't anticipate. And as you said, sometimes people just don't like the lifestyle change if they have to make plans for an extended period of time. You and I are the same age. And when I look at what I've got another 20, I'm hoping at least 20, 25 years, when's that going to look like? Where do I want to live? All of those questions come to mind. Yasmin's a little young to even worry about that yet, but it's certainly something.
He's at the right age to start thinking about it and planning for it.
He is.
Speaking of solo aging, I've never been married, don't have a girlfriend, don't have any kids. I am sure 40 plus years is going to go by like in a blink of an eye here as well too. So I'm definitely very aware and want to be mindful as to what's going to happen between now and then as well.
Sure.
Well, I love that we can have a little levity around this very serious topic. And it's one that I think and first of all, it will affect everyone, whether you're a solo ager or whether you have a friend who is, or someone in your extended family might be. So I think depth and breadth of this conversation is really a wonderful element for our audience. And I'm sure that they're going to share this with a lot of their friends and family as well.
Yeah. Hey, Sarah, I'm curious. Has there been a solo ager that you've been in touch with, worked with, attended one of your events that is an inspiration? Like something about them that really has been a role model for how fulfillment and joy can be in this journey.
Yeah, I've had a number of people in my workshops really take aggressive action once they got it, that they were on their own. They needed to do that. My most recent, I will say, success story, I don't even consider it a success story for me. I think my most wonderful example of someone whose eyes were opened by some of the things I said is a woman who came through a local workshop that I did. And I always do these workshops in person locally so that I can bring in experts. And I bring in a financial expert, I bring in a legal expert, I bring in a professional fiduciary, and I bring in a senior care advisor. So after listening to me and all of these other experts, she realized that she has a husband who has Parkinson's, and they were still living in their single family home. And before the workshop was over, and the workshop lasts 6 months, we meet once a month for 6 months.
Wow.
It gives people time to actually make some changes and do some of the things we're talking about. So at the last session, she announced that they had put their house for sale. She had found a senior living community. They were scheduled to move in. She had done the homework during the 6 months. She had gone out and looked at a lot of senior living communities and found the one that really appealed to them and that was within their budget, and they're moving. That was the most recent and most flashy example I could give you.
Good for you. Good for you. That was life-changing for them.
It is. The whole thing is life changing, and they're going to be in a position where they're not so vulnerable. There she is. She's our age with a husband who has advanced Parkinson's. Talk about vulnerable. No kids.
Let's talk about the vulnerability. And I'm sure that you've found others who have taken your workshop or have been participants in maybe an audience that you've addressed. Have they spoken or realized their vulnerabilities until you bring it to the forefront?
Well, they've realized it to the extent that they're willing to put themselves in the workshop. I admire people who get themselves out of that comfort zone enough to even come to one of my talks. They've acknowledged, at least, that they are vulnerable. There's things that they need to set up for themselves as they get older. Again, many of them took care of an aging parent, and they get it that there's nobody down the line to do that for them. So I read a piece of literature when I was first researching all of this about 10 years ago. And of course, there wasn't any gerontology literature, but I found some sociology and anthropology literature. And one anthropologist, I think, said that in all of the American societies and many of the tribal societies that he had studied, the one conclusion that he could make was that children are the only morally committed to taking care of their aging parents. It's a moral imperative in most societies of the world. Children take care of their aging parents.
I can attest to that. Yeah, I'm currently myself and my sister, we're actively helping take care of our elderly parents as well too.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sarah, this has been such a rich conversation, and I feel like there's so many different areas that we can dive deeper. And I know that's why you've written your book and you've got a number of different talks that you give. How can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work so that they can be able to either experience this themselves, but also be able to share it with their communities and clients that they're working with?
The first thing to do if you're new to this whole topic is to buy my book. Um, I'm not self-published. I have a publisher. Oh, I don't make money advertising. My publisher might make a few bucks, but it has now sold over 12,000 copies in 6 years. So I'm pleased at that, and I'm proud of that. It's a good primer on solo aging, and it's called Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Agers. It's available anywhere. You can order it from your local bookstore, which I always encourage. You can buy it from any of the online booksellers. It's available in print. It's available in audio, available on Audible. It's available in e-reader format. So any way you like to read, it's available.
Great. I'll make sure we include links to your book as well too.
What a topic.
Sarah, it's so important that you and the community of thought leaders like yourself who focus on this particular area, because I think that it's an often forgotten segment, but it's the reality of so many of us who are aging, and whether we are aware of it or not, at some point in time we will be, alone as well too. So to be prepared is such an important piece. So grateful to have you join us today and just share your wisdom.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I've loved our conversation. Thank you so much.
Any final thoughts before we just wrap up?
Just, I think for everybody, if you aren't a solo ager, I bet you have one in your family or in your community. So you might notice that there are solo agers around and encourage them to do some planning up front so they're not left in a bad situation uh, like the story we just heard.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So happy that we got a chance to spend some time together today.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it valuable, please subscribe, follow, and leave a comment or review on your favorite platform. If you have friends, clients, or loved ones who are retired or thinking about retirement, we invite you to share this show with them. Check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned in this episode at realretirementshow.com. Remember, retirement is a joyful journey we get to experience together. Join us next week for another Real Retirement Conversation.